Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: Climate crisis threat to financial stability. Kremlin critic flees Russia. Israel and Hamas accuse the other of violating ceasefire. US and Japan act to halt yen's slide to 40-year lows, and why younger generations may be more cancer-prone. Starting with politics, Myanmar's former leader Aung San Suu Kyi meets Red Cross official. It was the first publicized meeting between her and a foreign official since she was ousted in a 2021 military coup. The president's office said in a statement that Arnaud Debec, the resident representative of the International Committee of the Red Cross (ICRC) to Myanmar, met with Suu Kyi, 81. Milei empowers Argentina to bar or deport foreigners over hateful remarks about the country. The decree follows weeks of criticism directed at Argentina after contested refereeing decisions in a World Cup match fueled accusations that FIFA had favored the Argentine team, marking a shift for a country whose constitution explicitly encourages immigration and has long offered foreigners broad civil rights and access to residency, education, and healthcare. Anti-war politician and Kremlin critic Boris Nadezhdin flees Russia for France. Nadezhdin, 63, a former liberal lawmaker who had openly criticized President Putin and Moscow's Ukraine offensive, said that he had left the country after being detained outside Moscow and blocked from running for parliament. He was one of the few such critics who had remained in Russia and had been seeking to stand in September's tightly controlled parliamentary elections, as almost all of Putin's other critics are now in jail, in exile, or dead. EU tells Spain borders are a shared European responsibility. European Commission President von der Leyen offered Brussels support to Morocco after tens of thousands of people crossed into the North African exclave of Ceuta. The incident prompted France to introduce temporary border checks and led governments in Italy, Denmark, and Finland to call for Spain's suspension from the Schengen area. Denmark military conscription in response to Russia, US. Around 1,600 Danish military recruits began the country's new extended conscription, embarking on an 11-month service period as Denmark accelerates its defense build-up, driven by Arctic security pressures and the war in Ukraine. Denmark has extended conscription to include women for the first time and increased standard service time to 11 months from 4, while the number of conscripts is set to increase to 7,500 annually by 2033 from 5,000. Moving to stories in conflict, Al-Qaida-linked militants, separatist rebels, join forces in Mali. The alliance between JNIM jihadi fighters and the Azawad Liberation Front has produced some of the largest attacks on Malian security forces in years, marking an escalation in what analysts describe as the world's most terrorized region. The groups launched simultaneous attacks across the country in April for the first time in a decade, and this month ambushed a military convoy, capturing or killing dozens of soldiers and adding pressure on the ruling junta. Irish police intercept car bomb headed for Northern Ireland border. 2 people were arrested after the discovery of the sophisticated device, the latest in a string of disrupted plots attributed to Irish Republican splinter groups. Most Republican militants ended their campaign against British and pro-British forces following the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, but small factions remain active, chief among them the new IRA, which has claimed credit for multiple attempted attacks this year. Israel and Hamas accuse the other of violating ceasefire. The roadmap addresses in more specific terms the type of weapons Hamas and its allies will be required to hand over to a new technocratic government, and also says Israel should halt all military operations in Gaza. Residents see the roadmap as a positive development, but remain skeptical that either Israel or Hamas will adhere to the terms. US troops in Mideast may have to surrender cell phones. The top US commander for the Middle East has warned troops that cell phone videos shared online can help Iran target American bases, and some deployed personnel could soon be ordered to surrender their phones. The US military said Iran was benefiting from being able to see the success or failure of its strikes in near real time by searching news reports or online posts by journalists referencing reactions, photos, and footage from the phones of US troops. LNG tankers struck in apparent drone attack on Egypt's port of Damietta. 2 dockside LNG tankers were hit simultaneously at the port, which sits on the Mediterranean coast at the eastern end of the Nile Delta. Both impacts sparked fires that local services extinguished, with no casualties reported on either vessel. Now for the latest economics news. US and Japan act to halt yen's slide to 40-year lows. The coordinated intervention comes as Japan's currency approaches 4-decade lows, piling pressure on an economy reliant on imported energy and food, which becomes more expensive to buy as the yen weakens. The US administration's support arrives as Prime Minister Takaichi faces mounting political pressure to curb inflation, with analysts framing the rare bilateral action as an effort to prevent a sell-off in the yen and Japanese government bonds from spilling into global markets, including US Treasury yields. ECB warns climate crisis threatens core financial stability. The central bank said it is stepping up monitoring of financial risks tied to the decline of ecosystem services, nature-related processes like water, pollination, and habitat that underpin economic activity, because banks' exposure to that dependency is harder to map than a single extreme weather event. The warning follows a summer of wildfires across France and Spain that destroyed land, businesses, and homes amid record heat, adding to concern that the rising frequency of natural disasters poses a broader threat to financial stability. Minister apologises as Korean leveraged ETF investors face heavy losses amid chip stock falls. South Korea's efforts to rein in leveraged products, blamed for market volatility, may not go far enough, analysts say, after retail investors ploughed $9.7 billion into newly introduced single-stock leveraged ETFs. The speculative boom has left holders with heavy losses as the Kospi index suffered a sharp correction led by chip stocks, with the Codex SK Hynix single-stock leverage ETF, designed to deliver twice the daily move in SK Hynix shares, falling more than 80% from its peak. European drought drives Rhine barge rates to record highs and Danube levels to historic lows. Severe drought across Western and Central Europe has left the Upper Rhine barely navigable, restricting barge loadings to as little as 10% of capacity and pushing freight rates to record highs, while the Danube has fallen to around 10 centimeters in Budapest, well below the previous all-time low of 33 centimeters set in 2018. The low Danube levels have forced Hungary's Pax nuclear power plant into partial shutdown just as summer demand peaks, testing the leadership of PM Magyar. Firms move in on Venezuelan oil 7 months after Maduro's removal. Foreign oil companies and investors are betting Venezuela's crude reserves, the world's largest, are finally open for business, 7 months after the US removed then-President Maduro. Acting President Rodriguez has scrapped the rule requiring state-run PDVSA to hold majority stakes in joint ventures, allowing private firms to operate fields directly and retain more profit, while Washington has unwound sanctions to ease access to the country's 300 billion barrels. Turning to development. China steps up protection for chip designs in revised regulations. The rules, signed by Premier Li Qiang on July 23rd and taking effect October 15th, tighten registration standards and allow punitive damages for serious infringement of integrated circuit layout designs. The detailed component arrangements central to semiconductor development, even for firms that don't manufacture chips themselves. The measures don't amount to export controls, but reflect the growing strategic importance Beijing is placing on domestic chip know-how, as China's semiconductor industry works to build alternatives after US restrictions limited access to advanced design software and manufacturing equipment. Guinea says it's opting out of the ECOWAS WAS single currency. The country is the first of the 12-member West African bloc to announce it will retain its national currency, the Guinean franc, ahead of the ECOWAS planned July 2027 launch under a phased rollout for states meeting convergence criteria on inflation, debt, and monetary stability. Analysts cite concerns that joining before building sufficient production capacity could stifle Guinea's economy, particularly given that 80% of its exports go to Asia rather than the region. US makes visa bond program permanent, hitting 30 African countries. The State Department's rule requires nationals from 50 countries applying for B1 business or B2 tourist visas to post security deposits of up to $20,000, with officials saying the move aims to curb visa overstays. The policy, which took effect August 3, 2026, expands a pilot launched in August 2025, and the deposit is forfeited if a traveller violates the terms of their stay. Study shows why younger generations may be more cancer-prone. Researchers are observing certain age-related types of cancer more frequently in younger people. A new study suggests this could be because younger generations are aging faster than their parents or grandparents. The reason, they suggest, is that younger generations are displaying a wider gap between their biological and their chronological ages. In short, they are aging faster. 582-ton superconducting magnet for fusion reactor. The toroidal field magnet, built for China's next-generation burning plasma experimental superconducting tokamak BEST project, stretches 21 meters and is designed to help contain plasma heated to roughly 100 million degrees Celsius, about 6 times hotter than the sun's core. The magnet generates a powerful magnetic field that suspends the superheated plasma inside the reactor's donut-shaped vacuum chamber, keeping it from touching the walls as researchers work. Finally, our social news. UK police programme aims to divert teen hackers away from crime. The National Crime Agency scheme operates alongside a programme that identifies potential terror offenders, has received more than 1,150 referrals over the past 8 years, with nearly 600 of those in the last 3 years alone. Authorities say teenage hacking groups are playing an increasingly prominent role in serious cyber attacks, with young, English-speaking hackers linked to breaches at Transport for London and MGM Grand in 2024, and Marks & Spencer and the Co-op in 2025. Japanese population falls below 120 million for first time in 42 years. The number of Japanese residents stood at 119.74 million as of January 1st, down 0.76% from the previous year, and marking the 17th consecutive year of decline since peaking in 2009, according to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. Foreign residents, by contrast, rose 9.62% to a record 4.03 million, with a record 720,988 people moving to Japan from abroad in 2025, bringing the country's total population, including foreign nationals, to 123.8 million. Ultra-processed food companies hindering health drives by suing countries. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the world's largest food corporations are suing governments that try to promote healthier diets, accusing them of obstructing public health measures and costing countries billions in healthcare and legal costs. The claim comes as nearly 1 billion people worldwide live with obesity, and ultra-processed foods now make up roughly half the average diet in countries including the UK, US, and Australia, prompting governments to introduce warning labels, marketing restrictions, and junk food taxes. Romania expands bear cull to curb rising attacks. Lawmakers doubled the country's annual hunting quota to nearly 900 for this year and next, aiming to control a brown bear population estimated at 10,000 to 13,000, Europe's largest outside Russia. Encounters have grown more frequent as habitat loss pushes bears into towns, with nearly 30 people killed over the past 2 decades, though the quota increase has drawn criticism from wildlife experts. Eating less protein could slow aging, major review finds. The analysis of more than 350 studies found that protein restriction can improve metabolism, reduce inflammation and cellular damage, and activate pathways linked to healthier aging, challenging assumptions behind the recent protein boom. Researchers noted that extra protein does benefit muscle growth and exercise recovery in active individuals, but said most people are relatively sedentary and likely consuming more protein than they need. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.